Ethan Miller wasn't anyone special. At least, that's what he used to say. Born and raised in a small town in southern Missouri. A place with one high school, two churches, and too many secrets. Ethan was just your average 19-year-old. He worked at a local garage, fixing old pickup trucks and rusted sedans for neighbors who'd known him since he was a kid. He wasn't rich, he wasn't famous. But he had dreams, and more importantly, he had heart. Ethan lived with his grandmother Martha, a retired school teacher who took him in when his parents died in a car accident when he was just 5. She raised him on a teacher's pension, Bible quotes, and love. Not the loud dramatic kind, but the quiet steady kind that's always there. Even when everything else falls apart. Every morning, Ethan would wake up at 6:30 a.m. Not because he had to, but because that's when Martha woke up. They'd have coffee together on the porch, watching the sun rise over the cornfields. She'd always say, "Sunrise means second chances," and he believed her. He had a girlfriend, Emily. They'd been together since junior year. She was the smart one, honors student, wanted to be a nurse. Ethan used to joke that she was the beauty and the brains, and he was just the guy with the toolbox and big ears. They had plans. Simple ones, but they mattered. Move to St. Louis. Start a small car repair shop. Get a dog. Maybe a little house with a swing in the backyard. Nothing big, just a life. That summer, Ethan had saved up enough money to buy a used pickup, not to drive around and show off, but to haul tools. He wanted to start taking weekend repair jobs on the side. He even printed out flyers, Miller's Mobile Mechanics, honest work. Fair price. Everyone loved Ethan. He helped neighbors mow their lawns, tutored kids in math, and even fixed up old bikes for free. If someone's car broke down in the middle of the road, Ethan would be the first to pull over. He wasn't perfect. No one is. He'd had a few dumb fights in high school, hung out with some shady kids for a while, but he grew out of it. Grew up. Learned from it. That's what made what happened next so shocking. No one saw it coming. Not Ethan. Not Martha. Not Emily. Not the town. It happened on a Friday night. Hot, humid and quiet. Like most nights in towns where nothing ever really happens, until it does. That night would change Ethan Miller's life forever. Because that was the night someone was murdered, and the police would come knocking on Ethan's door. Friday night, July 12th. The kind of summer night where the air feels too heavy to breathe. Most people in town were either at the drive-in theater, or inside, avoiding the heat. Ethan was home. He'd worked a long shift at the garage, and then spent the evening fixing Mrs. Turner's lawnmower, for free. Around 10 p.m., he took a shower, made himself a grilled cheese sandwich, and fell asleep watching reruns of Mythbusters. Somewhere across town, at a small bar on the edge of the county line, Murphy's, things weren't so quiet. A fight broke out. Loud, violent. Witnesses said it was over a girl. Someone shoved, someone screamed. And then, a gunshot. A young man named Caleb Harris, 21 years old, son of a local city councilman, was found dead in the alley behind the bar. Shot in the chest. No security cameras, no weapon, no clear suspect. Just blood, panic, and silence. By morning, rumors were already spreading. Caleb had gotten into trouble before. Fights, drugs, bad company. But this time, it was different. This time, he was dead. And someone had to pay. It didn't take long for Ethan's name to come up. Why? No one really knows. Maybe it was a bad tip. Maybe it was a lie. Maybe it was something much worse. One anonymous call. That's all it took. They said Ethan had been at the bar. That he'd gotten into an argument with Caleb. That he was seen leaving the alley, shortly after the gunshot. None of it was true. But by then, truth didn't matter. At 6:43 a.m., Ethan Miller was woken by loud knocking on the front door. He stumbled out of bed, half asleep, thinking someone needed help with their car. Instead, he opened the door to two uniformed officers, and a detective in a wrinkled shirt holding a search warrant. They didn't let him speak, didn't let him call his grandmother, didn't ask any real questions. They cuffed him, rid him his rights, and put him in the back of a cruiser. Martha stood on the porch in her nightgown, trembling. She asked, "What's going on?" The officer replied, "Just some questions, ma'am. We'll have him home in a few hours." Ethan didn't come home for 18 years. At the station, they questioned him for hours. "Where were you last night? Did you know Caleb Harris? Why would someone say they saw you at Murphy's? Why'd you run?" He kept answering, "I wasn't there. I don't even know Caleb. I didn't do anything." But the questions didn't stop. And slowly, the tone shifted from questioning to accusing. No lawyer. No phone call. They told him, help us help you. Tell us what happened, and we'll go easy on you. He refused. They kept him overnight. No charges yet. Just investigating. But the next day, it was all over the local news. Murder suspect detained in death of councilman's son. No mention of a trial. No mention of evidence. Just a mugshot. A name. A label. Suspect. Emily called the station over and over. They wouldn't let her speak to him. Martha tried to hire a lawyer. But no one wanted to go up against the Harris family. The town started whispering. He always seemed too quiet. Didn't he get into a fight a few years ago? Maybe he just snapped. That was the moment Ethan realized. It didn't matter what he said. Didn't matter what he knew. The story had already been written. And he wasn't the author. Ethan Miller's trial lasted 3 days. His sentence would last 18 years. But let's back up. After the arrest, Ethan was held in county jail for 7 months. He was denied bail on the grounds of being a flight risk. He wasn't. He'd never left the state in his life. The public defender assigned to his case, Greg Tomlinson, had more than 40 open cases. He met Ethan twice before the trial. Total time spent preparing, less than 4 hours. And still, Ethan believed the truth would come out. He thought if he just explained it clearly, if they just listened, someone would understand. They didn't. There was no physical evidence tying Ethan to the crime. No fingerprints. No DNA. No weapon. What they did have was a witness, a man named Derek Hall who claimed he saw Ethan near the alley behind Murphy's bar. He said Ethan looked nervous. What the jury wasn't told, Derek had 2 prior convictions and was arrested just 2 weeks earlier for drug possession. In exchange for his testimony, the charges disappeared. Then there was the gun. Police claimed they found a pistol hidden in a storm drain 3 blocks from Ethan's house. The gun had no prints, no serial number. Ballistics were inconclusive, but the prosecution insisted it was consistent with the murder weapon. And then, there was a text. A single message recovered from Caleb Harris's phone. Sent the night he died. It said, "Meet me out back, bring the cash." The number it was sent to, a burner phone. Untraceable. But the prosecution claimed Ethan used it. No proof. Just theory. They painted him as a jealous ex-boyfriend. Said Caleb had been flirting with Emily, Ethan's girlfriend, and that Ethan had snapped. None of it was true. Emily took the stand. She said she hadn't spoken to Caleb in months. Said Ethan was home that night with her. But the prosecution cast doubt. She would lie for him. They said, lovers protect each other. On the 3rd day of trial, Ethan took the stand. He told the jury he didn't do it. Told them where he was. Told them how he was woken up by police the next morning. He looked them in the eye and said, "I didn't kill Caleb Harris. I didn't even know him." But by then no one was listening. They weren't hearing a story. They were watching a performance, one where the ending had already been written. On the 4th day the verdict came in. Guilty. 2nd-degree murder. Sentence. 25 years to life. Eligible for parole in 8. Ethan didn't cry. Didn't scream. He just looked over at Martha. She was holding Emily's hand. Her face pale. Trembling. And for the first time in his life, Ethan felt truly alone. In the end it didn't take much. A shaky witness. A planted theory. A system that didn't care about the truth. Only the closure. The courtroom emptied. Reporters got their headlines. The Harris family got their justice. And Ethan Miller was taken away in handcuffs. Ethan Miller was 20 years old when he arrived at Brickridge Correctional Facility, a maximum security prison surrounded by razor wire, miles of farmland and silence. It was the kind of place where time didn't move. It just stopped. The first thing they did was shave his head. Then they gave him a number. Then they put him in a cell. 6 feet wide. 9 feet deep. With a man named Rico who had already been inside for 13 years. Rico didn't speak for 2 days. On the 3rd he said, "Don't trust nobody, not even me." That was the only advice Ethan got. Prison wasn't like the movies. There were no clicks. No clever trades. No clever lines. There was violence. There was fear. There was routine. Designed not to help you survive, but to make you forget who you were. Ethan was tested early. One morning in the chow hall, another inmate bumped into him. Ethan apologized. Big mistake. The man punched him. Then 2 more joined in. By the time the guards stepped in, Ethan's face was swollen shut. No medical attention. Just a cold sink. A dirty towel. And 3 days in solitary. For starting a fight. The first year broke him. He stopped eating. Stopped writing letters. Stopped talking. Martha wrote him every week. He read every letter. and never wrote back. She'd always end them with, "Sunrise means second chances." But Ethan didn't believe in second chances anymore. By year 2, something changed. One morning, he found a torn paperback stuffed under his mattress. A legal book, outdated, pages missing, but he read it. All of it. Then another. Soon he was spending hours in the prison library, reading case law, appeals, legal loopholes. He began helping other inmates with their legal forms, writing petitions, explaining court language, drafting letters to judges. He got a nickname, the jailhouse lawyer. He didn't ask for it, but for the first time in years people started coming to him, not with fists, but with questions. He got stronger. Physically, mentally. He worked out, wrote letters, kept a journal. He even enrolled in a distance learning program in criminal justice. He didn't do it because he believed he'd get out. He did it because it was the only way to stay human. Sometimes at night, he'd close his eyes and imagine sitting on the porch with Martha again. Just the two of them, watching the sun rise over the cornfields. But then, in year 9, Martha passed away. A stroke. Quick. Sudden. Ethan wasn't allowed to attend the funeral. They wouldn't even let him call. A guard handed him a letter, from Emily. Short. Just a few lines. "She believed in you until the very end. I do too. Don't give up." That night, Ethan cried for the first time in years, not from fear, not from anger, but from a pain so deep, it had no name. After that, something inside him shifted. He started writing again. Not just legal briefs, but his story. Every night, in a spiral notebook hidden under his bed. Not because he thought someone would read it, but because he had to remember who he was, what they took from him, and what they couldn't. Her name was Sophie Hart, 34. Freelance investigative journalist known for chasing long uncomfortable stories about broken systems and forgotten people. She wasn't famous, didn't have a big platform, but she had a stubborn sense of justice. One night, while researching a different case, she stumbled upon a legal database filled with prisoner petitions. Most were desperate, messy, handwritten pleas, but one stood out. Typed, clear, focused, titled, "A Petition for Review of Wrongful Conviction. Ethan Miller 0@43118." It wasn't angry or begging. It was calm, like it had been rewritten 100 times. Sophie kept reading, then stopped, and read it again. No physical evidence, no motive, no reliable witness, no competent defense. Yet, a 25-year sentence. It didn't make sense. The next day she drove to Brickridge Prison and requested a meeting. They made her wait 2 weeks. When Ethan finally walked into the visitor room in a faded jumpsuit, he didn't smile. "You here for another sob story?" he asked. Sophie looked him in the eye and said, "No, I'm here to hear yours if you want to tell it." And he did. For 3 hours Ethan talked about the arrest, the trial, the silence. Sophie took notes. Mostly, she listened. Before she left, Ethan handed her a crumpled paper with a name, the witness who testified against him. "He lied, and I think he wants to come clean." That night, Sophie started digging. Old court records, phone logs, bar receipts. What she found was ugly. The lead detective had retired under investigation, the prosecutor, now a judge, and the witness, Derek Hall, had been arrested 6 times since the trial. 3 weeks later, she found him in rehab outside Kansas City. At first he denied everything, then he cracked. "They told me if I didn't say it was Ethan, they'd lock me up. They needed a name. Any name." Sophie recorded it all. Then she wrote a 26-page report, and sent it to every paper and non-profit she could find. Only one responded. The Innocence Project Midwest. Within a month, lawyers filed a motion to vacate the conviction based on new evidence. The state pushed back hard, called Derek's confession unreliable, said the jury had spoken, said reopening the case would be disruptive to justice. But this time, something had changed. Public attention. Sophie published an article, "The Boy They Buried Alive, the Ethan Miller Case." It went viral. People asked questions, shared the story. For the first time in 18 years, Ethan's name wasn't followed by killer. It was followed by maybe innocent. But this wasn't a movie. There was no instant reversal, no dramatic confession in court. It was slow, ugly, painful, and the system didn't want to admit it had made a mistake. March 4, 20. It had been 6,588 days since Ethan Miller walked out of his grandmother's house in handcuffs. Now he was back in court. Same county, same building, same system. But this time, the story was different. This time, someone was listening. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, students, locals, people who had read Sophie's article, people who had doubted the system for years, but never had a face to put to it. And in the front row, Emily. She hadn't missed a single hearing since the petition was filed. She had waited 18 years. She wasn't about to miss this. The state tried everything. They called the motion baseless, said Derek Hall's recantation was coerced, claimed that reopening a case after so long would set a dangerous precedent. The judge, Marla Whitaker, listened carefully. She had a reputation for being fair but cautious. Then Sophie was called to testify. She spoke clearly, confidently. She explained how she found the petition, how she tracked down Derek, and how the evidence didn't just raise doubts. It shattered the original case. Then Derek took the stand. Older now, tired, his hands shook. He looked at Ethan, paused, then said, "I lied. I didn't see him that night. I said what they told me to say, because I was scared, and I've lived with that guilt every day since." The courtroom went silent. Even the prosecutor didn't cross-examine him. But it wasn't over. The state still pushed back, argued that Ethan's original trial had followed proper procedure, that errors didn't always equal injustice, that closure was more important than clarity. But the judge wasn't buying it. She reviewed everything: the police reports, the missing forensic evidence, the incompetent defense, the coerced testimony. Then she looked at Ethan. "This court finds that a manifest injustice occurred in the conviction of Ethan Miller. The original verdict is hereby vacated. Mr. Miller is to be released immediately pending a full review of whether a retrial is even possible," which frankly, it does not appear to be. A soft gasp filled the room. Then applause. Quiet, respectful, but real. Ethan didn't react at first. He just sat there, staring straight ahead. Then Emily stood up and walked to him. The guards didn't stop her. She wrapped her arms around him. And for the first time in nearly 2 decades, he exhaled. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. Ethan said nothing. He stood in a simple suit provided by the Innocence Project, looking up at the gray sky. And then quietly, almost to himself, he said, "It smells like spring." He had entered prison in the age of flip phones and MySpace. He left in a world of iPhones, drones and TikTok. But some things hadn't changed. People still forgot, still moved on. But now, they remembered him. Ethan wasn't angry. Not in the way people expected. He once wrote in his journal, "They took my time, but not my mind. They stole my youth, but not my voice. And I will use that voice until someone hears it." And now people were listening. Freedom, people think, is a finish line, a door that opens, a burden lifted. But for Ethan Miller, it was something else. It was silence. It was awkward. Hugs and fake smiles. It was the sound of years he'd never get back. He moved into a small apartment above a bookstore, courtesy of a non-profit that helps exonerees restart their lives. They gave him a phone, a laptop, a second-hand suit, but they couldn't give him a past. He walked differently, now shoulders tight, eyes always scanning. When someone stood too close behind him, he flinched. He still woke up at 3 a.m. for no reason, still folded his clothes the way they taught him in prison. Old habits, scars without bruises. He never got an apology. The judge didn't apologize. The prosecutor never called. The police department issued a brief statement. "While unfortunate, we stand by the integrity of the original investigation." Unfortunate. That was the word they used for stealing 18 years from an innocent man. There was no compensation. Not yet. The state had a process for that. It could take years. He filed the paperwork, hired a lawyer, but he didn't wait for justice anymore. Instead, he started speaking. At schools, at law conferences, at protests. He didn't yell. He didn't preach. He told his story, plainly, letting the silence between words carry the weight. "I didn't get justice. I got out." That's not the same thing. People started calling him a symbol. Of what? They weren't sure. Hope, resilience, failure? He didn't argue. He didn't agree. He just kept talking. He reconnected with Emily. They went slow. Coffee, walks, silence. One day she asked if he was happy. He smiled. Kind of. "I'm here. That's something." In his journal, Ethan wrote, "The worst part isn't what they did to me. It's what they forgot to feel. They never looked back. Never wondered if they were wrong. I did 18 years for nothing. And they slept fine." This story isn't about a broken system. We already know it's broken. This is about the people who fall through the cracks and climb their way back up anyway. Ethan Miller lost everything. except himself. And in the end, maybe that's what they didn't expect. He was 38 years old when he saw a sunrise from outside a prison fence, and for the first time in a long time, he believed in morning again.